Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Urs Koenig, and we're going to be talking about his great book, leadership book, Radical Humility: Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human. How are you a badass leader and a good human? Urs, thank you so much for coming on. It's a really, it's a leadership book for modern times.
Thank you for the kind words.
And there's loads of stuff in there about your amazing life. Tell people where they can get hold of you.
So the web, urskoenig.com, urskoenig.com, and you can find all about my keynote speaking. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is where I hang out quite a bit. So get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. If you read the book, what resonates, what's difficult, I sincerely enjoy engaging with readers.
I mean, you've run a really interesting life in terms of being extreme sports. You've been a United Nations peacekeeper. Loads of interesting things. What was the inspiration behind the book?
Look, I've been drawn to humility as a concept for a long time, actually. So during my ultra endurance days, I was always drawn to the competitors who let their legs do the talking versus having a big mouth. So I always loved hanging around humble people. But then when I deployed on my first peacekeeping mission, Kosovo 2017, and then my second one in the Middle East, where you don't want to be right now, I was on the blue line between Lebanon and Israel, I sort of counterintuitively experienced that the best commanders in the peacekeeping mission I had were actually deeply humble leaders, deep self-awareness, build strong relationships, build psychological safety. So when I came back from my second mission about 3 years ago, I decided I want to write a book on humble leadership because I truly believed that that is the way to win in today's complex, fast-moving world. So the military, counterintuitively, a top-down command control environment, inspired me actually to write on humble leadership.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've interviewed a number of people that have come from a military background, and what they always say is something quite counterintuitive about. And they generally say that the military leadership is always better, depending on how you define better, than leadership that you would get in maybe commercial industries. So I've got a question for you, which is because I think still today we still see leadership and business about alpha personalities. So how do we, when we've got alpha personalities, how do we move from alpha personalities to radical humility which is just a polite way of saying giving up your power? How do you stop a humble leader from being walked over by ultimately a shark leader?
Right. Well, Tim, I get this question all the time, unsurprisingly, right? So I want to be very clear up front that leading with radical humility does not mean being weak. It does not mean being necessarily quiet all the time. It does not mean being meek. In fact, and I write about this quite extensively in the book, I put forward that in order to be fundamentally confident, I actually have to have humility and vice versa. So they go hand in hand. So for me to humbly ask you, Tim, as my team member, what can I do better? Where are my blind spots? I need to be fundamentally confident in myself, have a strong sense of self to ask these humble questions. Similarly, ambition and humility can go hand in hand. In order for me to achieve hard goals, I need to ask the difficult questions. What keeps us, Tim, for achieving our stretch goal? What's in the way? Where am I in the way? So if I need to ask these humble questions in order to actually achieve ambitious goals. So they go hand in hand for sure. The radically humble leader is not the one in the meeting who takes up all the airtime and who is the loudest voice. But as Jim Collins many years ago wrote in Good to Great, the humble leader is the one that has deep determination and then displays personal humility as well. So we can be strong, confident, highly driven, determined, and still lead with radical humility.
You served in military peacekeeping missions where lives are on the line. In that environment, is there really time for a tender approach, or is humility a luxury that can only works when the stakes are low?
Look, when the house is on fire, that's not the time to build relationships, right? To be tender on people. Let me be crystal clear about that. I too live in the real world. And in crisis, what do I need? I need my people empowered so they can make good, independent decisions fast at the front lines. There is no time to feed questions up the org chart to me as a leader. So what is required in order for me to do this as a leader? I need to be able to trust them. And they need to be able to trust me as the leader to make the right calls. The only way to build trust is if to have built these relationships, being tender on people, as I call it, up front. And one of the quickest ways, again, I write about this in the book, to build a trusting relationship, Tim, is to show up with a bit of vulnerability. And for everybody on the call now who freaks out now, oh, this is soft stuff, go and talk to Special Forces folks. You know what they say? During after-action reviews, rank switched off, humility switched on. The best and most successful teams in special operations teams know that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become invulnerable. So it is not a time for relationship building when the house is on fire, but we must develop these trusting, deep relationships with the vulnerability up front, so that when the famous stuff hits the fan, I can rely on my folks and they know they can trust me.
Yeah, you talk about being tender on people. How does a radical, humble leader fire somebody? Can you actually maintain someone's dignity while stripping them of their livelihood?
Yes, you can. It's not fun. It sucks. I had to do it plenty of times myself. But sometimes, Tim, the most loving thing I can do is to actually release you to the labor pool. It can be the most loving thing because the fit's not right. You're not delivering up to expectations. And most likely, unless you have zero self-awareness, you actually know about that too. But then the question is, how do I do it? So we've read all, and it continues. It's unbelievable. It continues to this day. People get laid off by text message, by email. No. Lay your people off at eye level. You can have a conversation. And by the way, ideally, unless it's a reduction in force, the person already knows that they're not living up to expectations because you as the leader have done the job of communicating where the gap is. And so when day X rolls around, you can have an eye-level conversation. You can say, like one of my commanding officers in Kosovo actually said to me, I love you and your work is not good enough. At eye level. You can do it at eye level.
And I love the piece in the book where you talk about the conversation, which is, I love you, but your work isn't good enough. And I agree with you. In many cases, people know that. It's just that it needs somebody to actually say it. But it's a lovely way of, because we always talk about the shit sandwich, don't we? Which is where you say something nice and you say then something bad and then you say something nice, and everyone goes, "It's a shit sandwich," you know. And
right.
But that piece where you say, "I love you, but your work isn't good enough." We see heroic leaders, the Steve Jobs and Elon Musks of the world, changing the planet through sheer ego and stubbornness. Does your model of humility actually risk stifling the kind of obsessive genius that changes the world?
Well, unsurprisingly, Tim, I get that question quite a bit as well. So here is my sort of rebuttal. Number one, let's stop celebrating the sample size of 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so for every Steve Jobs, for every Elon Musk, there are hundreds, there are thousands, there are hundreds of thousands of narcissistic leaders who destroy value, bring down team, and run organization into the ground. So the research, not my own research, is crystal clear. Narcissistic leaders destroy value. So that's number one. Number two, what is true though, and also the research shows that we're actually naturally drawn to narcissists. We actually, and there's a whole body of research about the strongman leaders, and as we can see on the political level right now, they are back in charge. We're actually drawn to confidence over competence. We're drawn to narcissism over humility. And one of the reasons, there are a bunch of them, is it actually goes back to our Stone Age DNA, where we looked for leaders to protect us. Strong, male, ambitious, confident leaders. And we still carry that forward to this day. So we have to fight that urge. And there's actually research showing that good-looking people, as per the definition of that society, and tall people, take this, tall people make more money. So we have to fight that. But so, and then the other piece I would say, when people talk about Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, if you're convinced that you're, and I stress, an engineering genius like Elon Musk, if you're convinced that you're a product and design genius like Steve Jobs, Tim, forget radical humility. Go and change the world. But for the mere mortals, for you and me and most of us listening and watching, we can all benefit from deploying a more radical approach to leadership by elevating our team members and let them shine. And one last thing about Steve Jobs, by the way, and that's much less known. Of course, he was a jerk, but he actually also really lived intellectual humility amazingly well. He would drive people nuts. He walks into a meeting with one opinion. Somebody brings a counter argument. He changes his opinion on the spot and argues 2 minutes later exactly the opposite of what he said before. So he said, let the best idea win, not my idea. So actually, that's much less known about Steve Jobs. Intellectual humility was incredibly strong.
You use the word badass in your title. Isn't that a bit of a marketing gimmick? Or how can someone truly be humble if they are preoccupied with perceived as a badass? Can I just ask you, Urs? Yeah. You have your microphone on your thing is just here, and when it bangs against your cheek, it makes a noise.
Okay, I'll hold it. Thank you. So, yes, it's a great title. Yes, a great title of a book is to some extent marketing and sales. I totally give you that, absolutely. But here's the thing. You said an important piece. You said, if I'm preoccupied with being perceived as a badass, I'm not interested in being perceived. I want to be one. And there's a difference there. So if I want to be perceived as a badass, I'm actually I'm displaying narcissistic streaks. So narcissists are masters at managing their image, right? And how they're being perceived. That's why they often actually get quite far in leadership, because image management to some extent is part of our career development, our leadership. So that's why they get far. But I'm more interested in being one. And sometimes being a badass means putting yourself into hot water. It means speaking truth to power. It means shining a light on the stuff that's not going well. And sometimes it means risking your career. I mean, I was fired once because I said the wrong thing. And so I think I'm not interested in being perceived as being a badass. I want to be one. And there's a difference.
Is there such a thing as too much transparency? If a leader admits they are terrified or lost during a market crash, don't they risk inciting a panic that destroys the company?
Absolutely. I think you're exactly right. And that's why leadership, as you and I, Tim, know, is a thinking person's sport. You can overshare. And there is an appropriate level, and I talk about vulnerability quite a bit in the book. There's an appropriate and there's an inappropriate level of vulnerability. So I think I have an example like this actually I write about. So imagine you lead a team and you just lost a key client. 30% of your revenue is gone. How do you show up? Option one, oh my God, I have no idea what we should be doing. I'm shit scared, excuse my French. And by the way, sales and marketing really screwed that up for us. Number one. Number two, this is a really difficult situation. Everybody is scared. I feel it too. I need all our best thinking. Everybody in the room contributing to help us make up for that lost revenue. Let's get started. So there's a real difference in number one and number two. Both vulnerability in the first case, oversharing, inappropriate. In the second case, acknowledging the reality of what's going on, including the emotional reality, while making it clear that I can still be in charge of the situation.
You argue for the platinum rule, which is treating people the way they want to be treated. But if a team member wants to be left alone and avoid accountability, doesn't following the rule lead to a culture of mediocrity?
Well, I think that's sort of doing the platinum rule at this service, Tim, here, to be quite frank. we do that question. So if you're not into accountability on my team, you're on the wrong team. And by the way, shame on me for
allowing that,
for hiring you in the first place, if that's an issue you have, or not communicating along. If I inherited you as a team member, the importance of accountability. But the platinum rule really talks about the idea that I need to understand as a boss how my team members function and what gets the motor going. So if you, Tim, are somebody on my team who loves throwing around ideas and you love to brainstorm and whiteboard together, and then I have another one, I have Sarah, who wants to be quiet and work, as you mentioned, this team member, she wants to do her thing by herself. So with you, I get in the room once a day and we do 10 minutes of brainstorming and we throw around ideas and whiteboard together. With Sarah, I have my one-on-one once a week. And she's very organized and structured. She brings the issues to the table and we talk about it once a week, not once a day. So that's what I talk about, what the platinum rule of leadership really talks about, really understanding what motivates each of my team members, while of course still always being true to my leadership principles, because leadership, as you and I know, is not a popularity contest. I always ask, I always listen, I always thank for the input, but I, at the end of the day, decide what, if anything, we're going to change.
I just want to bring in a couple of comments. We've had Olsey, who says, nice question. It was probably actually a great answer rather than a great question.
No, that's to you, Tim. Great question.
and David Lentz, who tunes in every now and again. Radical humility, what a wonderful philosophy. Pride in leadership is a double-edged sword. Thanks, David. You mentioned that leaders should be the last to speak, but in a fast-moving crisis, isn't radical humility just a recipe for decision paralysis and death by committee?
You know what, Tim? That's similar to the platinum rule of leadership. You're sort of taking it too extreme. So no. What I mean when I say let's hold our thoughts as a leader is the awareness. And believe me, anybody who's worked for me knows, like, we're not doing endless conversations. Like, if we have 20 minutes to come to a decision, we will make a decision. And sometimes a okay decision on time, actually always, the okay decision on time is much better than the perfect one too late. But here's what happens. We need to have the awareness as leaders that if we speak first, let's say we have 20 minutes to discuss a problem, we frame it, and then we immediately jump in as the boss of what we think we should be doing. We anchor everybody's thinking in the room. We anchor everybody. So they will, inevitably move towards what we just suggested. But because we're humble leaders, Tim, we have smarter people than us on our team. Hopefully, we surround ourselves. So I actually want to hear and learn from what everybody else has to say. And that doesn't equate to endless committee meetings. We can be getting this done in 20 minutes. Everybody shares their take for 5 minutes. At the end, I summarize it. And if it's my decision, if it's indeed my decision as a leader, I can make the call. And most likely, hopefully, I change my initial opinion because I've heard from my smart team members. So that's what I mean about speaking last.
Is radical humility a privilege for women or marginalized groups who have fought twice as hard to be heard and respected? Isn't asking them to be humble just asking them to shrink back into themselves?
You know what, Tim? I humbly own the fact that I don't address this enough in the book. That's actually a blind spot I had while writing the book. And it was brought to my attention during an early podcast after the launch. The book has been out for almost 2 years now. I was on a podcast with an African-American female former executive who exactly pushed back like you do right now. And you know what? I had to say, you're exactly right. I agree with you. Sometimes, depending on our background, we need to actually earn our right to show up with a bit of vulnerability and humility, depending on our background. And so I don't address this enough, quite frankly, in the book, and I own that. So to some extent, you're right, it's a privilege. But what I would also say is the core elements of leading with radical humility: deep self-awareness, leading relationally versus just by content expertise, and then psychological safety. Those still hold true regardless of our backgrounds. But the vulnerability piece, we need to maybe earn, depending on our background, a little bit before we can show up like that.
And the last question, you talk about your father as an inspiration for the book. You talk about him a lot. What was the one moment in your own career where you failed most spectacularly to live up to his example, and what did it cost your team?
Oh, that's a great question, Tim. And yeah, that's a tough one. So I write about in the book, during my executive coaching career, I was hired in-house by one of my clients as a marketing director. And I took the job for all the wrong reasons my dad would have not been proud of. I liked the title, Director of Marketing, at a relatively young age. I liked the money. I liked sort of the prestige. And I didn't have a marketing background at all. It eventually, of course, I was let go, rightly so in hindsight. And it cost me my job. It cost some of my team members my job as well. The team fell apart. And so that was an example of me not showing up with humility, doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons, and something my dad would have not been proud of me.
Urs, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Radical Humility, Be a Badass Leader and a Good Human. There's so many great lessons in there. As I said, when we kicked off, it's a real modern day leadership book. So thank you so much for that. If I wanted to buy a copy of it, where could I get one from?
Amazon. In the UK, you have Amazon too, right? Yeah, Amazon.com. And if you can't get a hold of the book, email me and I'll make it happen for you.
Okay, excellent. And where can we get hold of you?
Again, my website, urskoenig.com, and on LinkedIn. And we'll take it from there. I look forward to connecting with everybody.
Urs, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the book. As I said, it's an excellent book. Really loved it. So many great leadership lessons in there you've lived an interesting life.
Thanks so much, Tim, for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Good.